Alright, this video goes out to Alan Williams. I think I'm pronouncing his name correctly. You may see my breath here a little bit. It's cold out here. This individual, and I'll put a link in the description to the actual video. He's, evangelical Christian, fundamentalist, older dude. And he made a video called Witchcraft, Worrying, in which he talks about the worrying trend and growth of certain New Age groups. He didn't mention which ones. White witchcraft, various forces like that, and calls it worrying. Worrying because they're leading people away from Christ. Now, of course, I don't believe in Jesus, and I could explain for a million years why, but I've already done that on video extensively. My point I'd like to make is this. Why is he so worried? See, from an occultist standpoint, from a satanic standpoint, from the standpoint of someone who does enjoy and dabble with and use darkness, essentially, both symbolic and otherwise, in music, in writing, whatever the case may be, it looks hilarious to me whenever a Christian fundamentalist says, I'm worried about the growth of white witchcraft. It worries me too. For totally different reasons. I don't care whether they're worshiping Jesus or not. They are. They claim power in the name of Jesus or some archangel, and they say, oh, I can heal you, and look at this horoscope I drew up, and all these wonderful things. They're charlatans. So for Alan Williams, and I'll make sure to message him the link to this video so that he can see it, your worries about the white witchcraft community are completely misplaced. These individuals are Christians. The sort of divination you're worried about is not actual occultism. It has no power. Ouija boards have no power. Tarot cards have no power. Horoscopes mean nothing. These things are parlor tricks. They're meant to entertain. They're not magical. And they're certainly not occultist. And no, you're not going to be possessed by demons, as I've already explained before, by a Ouija board. That's been debunked as a hoax many times. It's just one of those things people continue to believe post The Exorcist in 1973. As to the New Agers, these people mix in all sorts of mysticism, and it's even odds that you can even adequately describe what they're doing as a religion, because they all have totally different views on the subject. Some of them lean more to the occult or the metaphysical. They may be into psychic stuff. These individuals are worrisome only in that they pollute the bloodline of real occultism, and that they pollute the bloodline of real magical movements, real spiritual forces, and they dilute them down to such a level that they become basically useless. And I would point out the Tao, sort of the New Age Franciscans, as I pointed out on my previous video, and this also, Alan can look that video up, the last one that I made, and he'll find it's interesting that these Christians, these Christian individuals, get it so wrong time and time again. I would also ask you why you're worshiping a God who's so impotent, this supposedly all-powerful Jehovah that has all the power and created everything and has all the bitches in love in the world. He can do whatever he wants. If you read Judges, he can't even drive out iron chariots from the mountains so that the Hebrews can take over the Hittite land. This is an impotent Redeemer. This is a skeleton Messiah that you worship, a being whose power is limited to appearing on toast. This is not the face of ultimate power. This is the face of ultimate impotence. If you want to see a real black magician, you're looking at one. I should be 10 times more worrying at least than some Wiccan or New Ager. I do practice black magic. And yet I'm an atheist as well, which is a big mystery to most people. I do practice black magic. Black magic causes change in the world. And that change can be derived from an understanding of language and symbology and all of the things, for instance, alchemy. Well, alchemy was the search for sorcerer's stone and to turn lead into gold and be immortal. No, it wasn't the search for this philosopher's stone. It was early chemistry. It was science. It was science that would have been persecuted by the church had they not put 1,000 different archangels on their pictures and in their texts to say, well, I transmuted this metal into copper by the power of Raphael. Well, the church is okay with this because you did it through the power of God. So it's not occultism, it's good solid Christian teaching. And you're doing it for the benefit of the church anyway. Well, I promise I'll give you half the gold when I make the Philosopher's Stone. That wasn't their purpose to begin with. The Steganographia, great example. Hidden writing. It's a tract against the church. It masquerades. It's a philosophical manifesto made back during the Renaissance against the Catholic Church. It masquerades as an occultist text, but it has nothing to do with occultism. It's hidden writing. It's a system by which you can defeat the church, a system by which you emancipate your mind from their sort of mental slavery, because a little bit of heresy was okay as long as you were willing to, pay lip service to these various saints. And we have the same thing now. These New Agers and white witches and so forth, they have no power. They don't understand the symbology behind what they're doing, and they drag a bunch of Judeo-Christian morality into it. That alone disqualifies them from having any sort of impact whatsoever, because they still think that good and evil is the definition they were raised with by a Christian community. They still believe, this sex outside of marriage is bad. I can't do that. It's wrong. It's bad. But sex outside of marriage is perfectly acceptable. Yes, you heard it. Sex outside of marriage is great. Premarital sex is wonderful. Most sex is wonderful, unless it's some crazed rapist or child molester. It's all good. I hear you are always looking for someone to worship. This goes out to Alan and the Franciscan dude and all the Christians and the Jews and the Muslims. You're always looking for something to worship. Deep inside, you have no conception that what you are worshiping is real. There is not a person on this planet who is totally brain dead and dumb enough to actually believe the swill of the church. Any church. It doesn't matter which one. Nobody could possibly be that dumb. You understand deep inside, and this is why you have doubts about your faith, and you can say praise Jesus all over and over again. And you can lay hands upon each other and say, I pray that your faithlessness would go away. But it's not going to go away. That's the voice of reason telling you that what you are serving doesn't exist. That what you are serving is a lie. The church is a lie. There's not one true word in the entire Bible, because it's been so discombobulated over the ages that it no longer has a purpose or a meaning. The same holds true with the Torah, with the Quran. The Muslims are so fond of crowing about how the Quran is more recent than the Bible, so it must be true. The Mormons do the same thing. The Jehovah's Witnesses do the same thing. Any of 1,000 different tin horn little cults that springs up mostly in Los Angeles or Paris says the same thing. Well, we know that our book is true because right here it says, it was written by God. Well, it has a disclaimer right here. I swear to God it does. This book was written by Jesus Christ. We know this is true because the aforementioned book says so. Circular reasoning doesn't hold up to scrutiny, but it says it in a book, so it must be true. That's the logic which these people are using, and it's so flimsy. Why do you think Christianity is going down? Why do you think it's dissipating in the Western world? Because people are actually, and I hate to burst the bubble of the real cynical people who say, we're just getting so dumb. We're actually getting smarter. People are starting to realize that these Iron and Bronze Age cults and these medieval philosophies are wrong. And Alan Williams here will someday hopefully realize that too. That the God that he worships, and he strives so hard to please, will never reward him by revealing his face or even appearing on toast. It's not going to happen. And then you say, well, I'm worried about these occultists and witches that, by the way, have absolutely no idea what they're doing and are completely harmless. I could say the same about certain Wiccan groups. Pagan gods, pagan philosophy, Judeo-Christian morality, it doesn't mix well. It's like mixing oil and water. They don't understand the symbolism behind what they're doing. The people who founded the movement did. They were intellectuals. They were philosophers. They were ahead of their time. They understood what they were doing. It was symbology, and they got rich doing it. That was the point. Isn't that the point behind all religion? 2,000 years ago, lunatic Jesus wandered down the street smeared with his own filth. And guess what the Romans and the Jews did? They laughed their asses off because they knew he was a lunatic. But somebody got a good idea. They took the folk story of Jesus, and it's been suggested that the Romans did this to try to pacify the Jews. It's been suggested that some Jews who were close to Jesus did this because they wanted money or whatever they wanted. And they decided to write a really great best-selling story about him. And they did the same with Muhammad. Muhammad was an epileptic. He used to collapse in seizures and have all sorts of hallucinations. He saw the devil. He saw angels. He saw whatever. And they talked to him, write this book. Joseph Smith was a con man, the great leader of the Mormons, who righteously got cut off in the end and shot in the head. And he deserved to be shot in the head. And it's too bad he didn't get shot in the head 10 years earlier before he could start his goofball cult. And it's too bad that Jesus wasn't killed. It's too bad Muhammad wasn't killed. We should have some sort of system by which we can execute these people before they breed some sort of death cult. Look at the misery that's been caused by Christianity or Islam or Judaism. The Bible brags about how this powerful God commanded his troops to genocide. And you people, you ignorant individuals, have the gall to look at an atheist or a pagan and say, ha ha, you have no morality. To say that you're lesser, that you're bad people, you do all sorts of terrible things. Whose holy book talks about the Son of God being crucified for absolutely no purpose whatsoever? Oh, it's the Bible. What holy text talks about 5 or 6 different large-scale genocides of different tribes just so that they could have a little land? The Torah does, and the Bible too, because it contains the Old Testament. What book has been used as a recipe to remove the rights and downtrod the poor, women, gays, blacks, and atheists for the last 1,000 years? Oh, that's the Quran. You see, you don't have any clue what you're talking about. The God, by the way, the same God that all 3 of those groups worship, and the same God worshipped by Mormons, and the Mormons were a violent cult to begin with and used to raid caravans just like the Muslims did, this God is the same. It's the same violent God. You might as well, if there is such a being as the God of the Christians, Jews, Mormons, etc., this God is a tyrannical, overbearing, child-raping demon, not a good, wholesome, benevolent creator. Obviously, this being took over and killed the creator, the real creator, and then set itself up to be worshipped. And then you have the ultimate, the ultimate buttfuck for these religions. You say, well, God's all-powerful. Well, I've already proven that free will and an all-knowing God can't exist together, so they usually choose the side of, and the Lutherans especially, because they don't believe in free will, they believe in predestination. Oh, well, God is all-knowing, God is all-powerful. Well, then how do you have any foreknowledge that if this God literally can do whatever this God wants, that this God isn't sitting up there waiting to burn every church to the ground, laugh, run through the streets, and kill everybody? The God can. It can say whatever it wants to in the Bible and say, well, God promises not to do this. Well, God can break his promises if he's all-powerful. What guarantee do you have that you won't wake up tomorrow and the entire world is on fire because God was having a bad day? How do you know that every war and every act of terror and destruction on this planet isn't predestined by this being who is just completely chaotic and evil and wants to see people suffer? Why else would this suffering exist if you've got this all-powerful God? The Epicurean idea of, is God willing and able to prevent evil, blah, blah, blah. It seems the most likely is either there is no God and humans are just filth, in many cases, or there is a God, that God's completely crazy and evil. Or maybe there's multiple gods. Every time there's war, they're just taking different sides of the chess game. So don't worry about the white witches. Worry about yourself. Worry about the black magicians. Worry about the Satanists. These are the people like myself that actually do oppose your religion.